Auburn fan base in Deep South. College football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. My name is Kennard Vernon Stewart here for the podcast. We're talking Auburn football, and this thing has gotten off to a real interesting start for the Tigers and for many teams in the SEC. You look at the landscape of the SEC right now, and there's a wide span of teams who are, pretty successful and some who are struggling for a little bit. Like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speak Sports Auburn. Down deep south, college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is War Eagle. So to start the video out, I have a few takeaways, and I actually had way more intent of doing this video either yesterday or the day before. That way, the timeliness and the relevance of it would have been a lot more prominent. But I mean, to be honest, guys, I just didn't have time. But I do want to, for the continuity of the channel and for us to continue to get the information out, and maybe sometimes you may hear something different from me than you hear from other content creators that talk about college football, that may even talk about Auburn, that may even add to your perspective of where we are at this point. A couple of takeaways, well, three takeaways. I'll try to do at least three. Auburn faced New Mexico this past week. They faced a dual threat quarterback. They faced a defense that really wasn't that good when you compare to other college football teams in the landscape of what we have now. Just wasn't a good team, and a good team overall. I honestly feel that most teams in the SEC would have had their way with New Mexico. At worst, winning by 10 points, between 10 and 20 points. I think that's kind of the litmus of what New Mexico could do competitive-wise for most teams in the SEC and the Power Four in that realm. So I think there's not much that you can take away as far as, hey, this by beating this team by, close to 20, well, a little over 20 points, that means that we're well on our way. I just don't think you can get that takeaway from a game like this. I think there's no way possible. Got a couple of takeaways, though. Auburn stars Hank Brown. I think Hank Brown was the best choice. And I also am a believer that if you're going to make a quarterback change and you know that quarterback change is imminent, you need to go on and do it, especially in a game like this. Why play Peyton Thorne in a game like this when you kind of sort of know what you're going to get? You're going to get a decent performance. You're not going to get a performance that's going to transfer heavily over to something that will be relevant in the next coming weeks against Arkansas, against Oklahoma, and then you have Georgia as your first road game in the SEC, which I think is going to be troublesome for the Tigers. Very challenging for the Tigers. And you want to go ahead and get that quarterback position pretty settled. And I think the two opponents that Auburn has coming up will help in doing that. I think Hank Brown was pretty solid. I think he did all of the things that you needed him to do as a first-time starter. You did a good job of coaching and protecting him from any problematic or dangerous situations, and he made great check downs in the run pass option. Ran the ball when he needed to. Did the RPO to the pass when he needed to do. So I thought for just setting the foundation for Hank Brown, everything that he did made sense. He had a few missed throws. He had and that's going to come as you start to try to solidify yourself into what's about to be some stiff competition, but you got to start somewhere. And I did a video on Peyton Thorne, when I talked about whether he should be benched or not. I just think there's not much left to give there. I don't think there's any more development. I think the ceiling, you've kind of hit the ceiling with Peyton Thorne. I mean, even as a backup, I mean, you really don't get much out of that situation. Yeah, you could call him 2 or 3, but I don't even know if Auburn puts him in as the second guy. at this point. Because I'm pretty sure film was reviewed. I had an opportunity to look at some things in the Cal game, and a 6 year starter or a 6 year guy. We want to put a lot of pressure on the offensive line. And yeah, they could have done a better job of protection, maybe. But I mean, you got guys running around wide open, and you don't hit them. That just doesn't make sense. And throwing 4 interceptions in one game against a team that is caliber wise is not near what you're going to face down the stretch between, now Arkansas. We're going to talk about them in a second. Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky. Kentucky, took Georgia to the brink now, albeit Georgia's a team that doesn't play particularly well on the road traditionally, even in their, consecutive runs of wins, don't particularly play well on the road against SEC teams. However, this is still a viable opponent. So I just think it was a great move for Hugh Freeze to move forward from Peyton Thorne. I think you've seen enough sample size to know that Peyton Thorne is just not gonna, that the ceiling that he's giving you is pretty much it. He has averaged, I understand the optimal season that he had at Michigan State, but still averaging double-digit interceptions and turnovers, and really not excellent at creating plays out of nothing, which is what a veteran quarterback can do or should do. He just didn't do it. That's my first takeaway from that. I think Auburn's move at quarterback was definitely, it just had to happen. And they did make it happen. I was actually surprised that they did, but it made sense, and it was very necessary to salvage year 2 and give Auburn a chance, at that position. Because if you look at it, the quarterback position and the success of the offense's ability to move the football is very vital for a team to be successful in college football. And we've seen changes that have been made at quarterback. Even at Auburn, you got to change at quarterback, back in 2010 with Cam Newton. And then, you look at the epic change of quarterback at LSU with Joe Burrow. Also, Jaden Daniels at LSU, winning the Heisman. That, like, the quarterback makes a quarterback play makes a huge difference. And when the quarterback is successful, nobody talks about the offensive line. But when the quarterback is unsuccessful, then they try to pinpoint and find reasons why this quarterback is not successful. And sometimes it's just they don't have the skill set. They just don't have it. And you can pinpoint the offensive line, but if you don't have the skill set to play the position at a high level, at times you're just not going to be that good. Because I just don't believe Auburn's offensive line is absolutely terrible. Of course, facing a MWC Mountain West Conference football team doesn't give you the litmus test that you want out of your ability to protect the quarterback. But I'm not too sure, and I'm saying this, gambling and rolling the dice. I'm not too sure if Peyton Thorne would have been, I think he would have been successful, but there still would have been some question marks. You had, Hank Brown with the ability to kind of push the ball around, move the ball around to different receivers, and throwing the ball out of the backfield, some things that we haven't seen, which I think was, pretty admirable considering the quarterback play and the offensive play from that point. Number 2, Auburn still continues to turn the ball over. I think Auburn has to do a much different job in the next coming weeks of protecting the football. You can't turn the ball over. You cannot stall drives. And in adding to the turnover situation against a Mountain West football team, you get a turnover, you get the ball in plus territory, you have to score touchdowns. I think Hugh Freeze alluded to that. That's not a victory. A field goal in a game like this is not a victory. You have to find ways to put the ball in the end zone, because teams down the stretch Arkansas, Oklahoma, Georgia, Missouri, Kentucky, all in that order. When you're down in the red zone, you have to score touchdowns. A field goal against most of those teams are going to be equivalent to a defensive stop. So you got to score touchdowns. And the last takeaway, I think the defense is just in disarray at this point. I think changes will be made. I think we will see a difference in scenario, especially with lineups. I thought, going against a dual threat quarterback where you have your defensive lineman kind of compacted in a 3-down set, kind of trying to run a 3-3 4 defense. I just a 3-3-5 defense. I just didn't think that made sense, especially when you block down on the defense and then give quarterback the free reign to kind of move around. I think you got to kind of, especially with Auburn facing Jalen Green from Arkansas, who's a dual threat quarterback, transferred from Boise State, led Boise State to a Mountain West championship appearance, and compiling 3,800 yards passing and 1,100 yards between 2022 and the 2023 seasons. I think he's very effective. You're going to have to play kind of a outside in approach. You got to compact him to where he cannot threaten you by moving outside of containment. And I think that's something that Auburn did a terrible job of this week, is containment and tackling. When you have, the opportunity to make that contact, make that tackle, you just don't make it. And I think that's something that Auburn really struggled with this week, and they absolutely cannot struggle with that this week. They have Jaquindon Jackson, who was running back from Arkansas, transferred from Utah. He looks pretty good as well, and it could be a dangerous situation if Arkansas does get that run pass option going. It could get a little dangerous. All right, guys, that's my time here. Go ahead and like the video, comment, and subscribe to Vernon Speaks Sports Auburn. Down deep south, college football is king, and on the plains of Auburn, the battle cry is war.